My name is Alice Reynolds. I'm 33 years old and currently working at an investment firm in Frankfurt, Germany. I moved here over a year ago after receiving a job offer from a multinational group. The work is intense and high pressure, but in return, I've gained complete freedom, something I never truly had back home. I'm originally from Austin, Texas. That's where I left my parents and my younger sister, Megan. She's 9 years younger than me, and to be honest, we've never been particularly close. When I was struggling through high school assignments and scholarship interviews, Megan was still playing with dolls, her hands constantly smeared with paint. By the time she had her first boyfriend, I was working full-time and filing taxes. We lived in two completely different worlds and only saw each other during Christmas, Thanksgiving, or our parents' birthdays. Occasionally, I'd send a happy birthday text along with the sunflower emoji she liked, and that was the extent of our communication. 3 years after graduating from college, I finally had a stable income and decided to stop renting. That's when my mom brought up the apartment my grandmother had left behind. "We're still renting out your grandma's place, you know," she said one evening when I dropped by for dinner. "But if you're interested, your dad and I can sell it to you at a good price. It's close to downtown and in a quiet area." I remembered that apartment clearly. The one where I used to bake almond cookies with Grandma every Sunday afternoon, or lie on the floor reading books in the sun-drenched room filled with the scent of lavender. When Mom offered it for $85,000, I didn't have to think long. I used my first savings to buy it. Legal transactions, notarized, title under my name. That apartment became the first place I truly called home. I lived there for 3 years, gradually renovating, replacing the floors, repainting the kitchen, adding plants to the balcony. Every time I came home, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. When the opportunity came to work in Europe, I knew I couldn't turn it down. It was the career move I'd been waiting for. I packed everything, locked the apartment, and handed it over to a property agency for long-term rental. I held on to it as a living memory, thinking, maybe someday I'd return. Since moving to Germany, I've kept even less contact with my family. Mom would occasionally send emails. Dad sometimes left a short comment under a photo I posted. But Megan? She had practically disappeared from my radar. I figured she was probably busy with college life, new friends, parties, and choices I had made over a decade earlier. I had no complaints. Honestly, I felt relieved. No more tense family dinners, no more, "When are you getting married?" or "Why don't you come back and find a stable job nearby?" But that piece started to crack one Wednesday afternoon when I was working on quarterly financial reports in my rented apartment in Frankfurt. My phone screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see. Megan. I stared at it for a long moment. Something felt off, like a ripple passing through the calm I'd carefully arranged around my life. I hesitated a few seconds before answering. "Megan?" Her voice was bright, as if we spoke every week. "Hey, you finally picked up. Hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all." I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my voice neutral. "What's up?" "Oh, I just got my college acceptance letter. I'll be starting at UT Austin this fall. Mom and Dad said I should call and let you know because..." She paused, then continued, "Because I'll be moving into your apartment." I almost jumped out of my seat. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" "The apartment downtown. The one you lived in before you left for Germany. It's less than a 10-minute walk from campus. Mom and Dad said it's perfect, so I should just move in and save money on rent." I gripped my phone tightly. "Megan, that apartment belongs to me, not Mom and Dad." She let out a small laugh, thinking I was joking. "Well, Grandma did leave it to them, right? You lived there for a while, then moved away. Now it's my turn. It's not a big deal." I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. "No, I didn't just live there. I bought that apartment from Mom and Dad for $85,000. The sale was notarized. There's a legally binding contract." Silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Megan gave a nervous chuckle. "Are you serious? Because they told me it's still under their name, and... I mean, You're abroad, you're not even using it, it's just sitting empty, and I I really need a place. I'm not asking for anything crazy. I took a deep breath. First of all, it's not sitting empty. I'm renting it out under a 12-month lease. Second, even if it weren't, it's still legally my property. You can't decide to live there without asking me. Her voice lowered. So, you're really saying no? I closed my eyes. It's not that I'm saying no. It's that you and Mom and Dad have no right to make that decision for me. I don't want you moving into that apartment. But they already said yes. I even started planning, buying a desk, a rug, string lights. I cut in. I don't know what they told you, Megan, but they can't offer you something that's no longer theirs. The air felt thick with tension. I heard her exhale sharply. Then she spoke again, her tone edged, with something that made my jaw tighten. You make good money. It's just an apartment. You don't need to cling to it like this. You can easily rent another place if you ever come back, but for me, this could change everything. I don't have options like you do. That hit like a slap. Not out of guilt, but out of sheer disbelief. You're saying that because I've worked hard and supported myself, I'm supposed to give up what I've built just because you need it? That's not what I meant, but I'm your sister, and I'm the person who paid $85,000 for that apartment. I said coldly. This conversation is over, Megan. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. I ended the call before she could say another word. My hand trembled as I set the phone down on the table. The unease clung to me the entire evening. I tried to focus on work, but every number blurred before my tired eyes. The next morning, just as I stepped out of a meeting with a client in Zurich, my phone rang. The name that appeared on the screen made my stomach sink. Mom. I answered the call while standing under the awning of a sidewalk cafe, the cold wind curling around my neck. Can you explain to me what exactly is going on? Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. I had been mentally preparing for this call since the night before, yet I still found my hand gripping the phone tighter than necessary. What's going on is, you and Megan made a decision about my apartment, without even asking me. That's not just some apartment, she cut in. That's the home our family once lived in, the place you've stayed in rent-free for 3 years. Now your sister needs it and you say no? Don't you think you're being selfish, Alice? I tilted my head up, watching the thick clouds drift across the gray European sky. Mom, I said slowly, I didn't stay there rent-free. I paid $85,000 to buy that apartment from you and Dad. The deed, the receipts, everything is in order. Do you remember? There was a brief pause before she replied. Yes, you technically bought it, but it's still family property. I believe when a younger sibling needs help, an older sister should step up. You have a good job, a career, and you're living in Germany. You don't need to hold on to that apartment anymore. I squinted at the pedestrians rushing past. So, because I have a stable income, I no longer have the right to keep something I paid for? I'm expected to sacrifice my own property because someone else needs it? She sighed. Don't make this more complicated than it is. This is just a family matter. Can't you let Megan borrow the apartment for a year? Are you really that petty? Something inside me stirred. Not anger, but disappointment. You're calling it borrowing? And what if she moves in and refuses to leave? Will you support me, or will you say, just let her stay? It's not worth fighting over. She's your sister. Don't exaggerate, Mom interrupted. Megan is a good kid. She wouldn't make things difficult, but if you keep being this harsh, you'll hurt her. I pressed my lips together. I'm your daughter too. Did you ever consider how I feel? From start to finish, everyone made plans behind my back, and I was expected to accept them like they were perfectly normal. That's not asking. It's imposing. You don't understand anything. Her voice rose. We've already put all our money into Megan's college tuition. We can't afford rent on top of that. The apartment is the only reasonable option. I almost laughed. And if that apartment didn't exist, what then? Let her sleep in the park? Or are you banking on some miracle? If you think it's the only reasonable option, then why not rent it from me? I'll draft a lease, offer a discount, and you can pay like any other tenant. This time, silence stretched long. I could hear her breathing on the other end. I can't believe you'd even suggest that, she said hoarsely. Do you really want to charge rent to your own sister? No, Mom, I answered, each word deliberate. I don't want to charge Megan anything, but I also won't let myself be taken advantage of just because I have some financial stability. If you don't want to pay, that's fine. Then Megan doesn't get to live there. I don't owe anyone that apartment. She stayed quiet for a long while. Then suddenly, her voice turned cold. If you're going to be this stubborn, then fine, do whatever you want. But don't be surprised when no one in this family wants to speak to you anymore. And she hung up. I stood still among the passing crowd, phone still pressed to my ear even though the call had ended. Something inside me had snapped. Not because Mom was angry, but because, for the first time, I clearly understood that I was no longer their good daughter. Not since the moment I chose to hold on to what was mine. I couldn't sleep that night. My rental in Frankfurt suddenly felt strangely cramped, though everything remained in its place. The voices from Mom, from Megan, kept looping through my head like a recording I couldn't stop. At 3 a.m., I sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea, eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window. My mind turned to the one person in the family who hadn't been tangled in this mess. Aunt Sarah. She's my mom's youngest sister, living in Seattle. Not flashy, not loud, and always the first to call things what they were, especially when others wouldn't. Back in high school, she was the one who quietly mailed me SAT prep books because, in her words, I doubt your mother will remember in time. I pulled out my phone, hesitated for a few seconds, then tapped to start a FaceTime call. Even though it was nearly 8 p.m. on the West Coast, she picked up. Her hair was tied back, her face bare of makeup, and her eyes still sharp as ever. Well, Alice Reynolds. A call in the middle of the night? This must be big. I gave her a weary smile. Do you remember Grandma's apartment in Austin? Of course, she nodded. You bought it from your parents, right? I remember helping look over the paperwork. I nodded. Yeah. And now, Megan wants to move in because Mom and Dad told her it still belongs to them. And when I pushed back, Mom called me selfish. She said they used all the money on Megan's tuition and couldn't afford another place. Aunt Sarah frowned. Hold on. You're renting that apartment out right now, aren't you? I am. There's a lease and a tenant. And I've explained all of that to both Mom and Megan. I told her everything. From Megan's call to the heated argument with Mom, every word, every detail, holding nothing back. Aunt Sarah didn't say a word the entire time I was talking. When I finished, she let out a deep sigh and said quietly, Your mom hasn't changed. She's always believed you should sacrifice for your sister. I've seen this pattern for years, but the way they turned your own property into an emotional bargaining chip, it's hard to accept. I felt a little lighter hearing her say that. Not because I needed someone to take my side, but because, at least, someone didn't judge me based on a one-sided story. What do you plan to do? She asked. I don't know, I replied, staring into my now cold cup of tea. I don't want to hate my sister, Auntie, but I'm angry. Because she didn't ask. Didn't even think it through. She just assumed the apartment was up for grabs. I don't know if it's intentional or if she's just repeating what Mom and Dad told her. Aunt Sarah nodded thoughtfully. There's one thing you should try. I looked up. Video call Megan, she said, face to face. Don't text, don't make a regular call. You need to see her eyes when you speak, and she needs to see yours. Sometimes only by looking someone in the eye can they realize how deeply they're hurting you. I sat there in silence. She continued, more gently. Maybe Megan's a victim in this too. Maybe she doesn't really know what's going on. Don't let your parents' words wedge themselves between you two. If you don't clear the air with her now, it might be something you regret later. I nodded slowly. Inside me rose a strange mix of fear and resolve. You're right. I'll call her. Aunt Sarah smiled faintly. I knew you'd do the right thing. After the call ended, I sat still for a while. Every emotion was still churning inside me. Anger, disappointment, but also a sliver of hope. Megan was still my sister, after all. If there was anything I could do to help her see the truth, I had to try, before everything collapsed beyond repair. I pulled out my laptop, fingers gliding across the screen, heart racing as I clicked the video call button. The screen flashed, connecting. It flickered for a few seconds before Megan's face appeared. She wasn't wearing any makeup. Her hair was loosely tied up with a cloth band, and she had on an old hoodie I remembered giving her for Christmas 3 years ago. She looked tired, but tried her best to smile. You're calling back? Megan asked, her voice a little hesitant. I thought after yesterday, we were done talking. I exhaled, straightening my posture. We need to talk, like two adults. Megan nodded slightly. So, what are you going to say? I'm guessing you're still not okay with me staying at the apartment, right? I looked straight at the screen. No, Megan. I'm not okay with it. But you need to understand why. Not just what Mom and Dad told you. She frowned. I heard directly from them that the apartment still belongs to them. I didn't make that up. I know, I said, opening the other laptop beside me and quietly pulling up the PDF file I had prepared. But this is the truth. I shared my screen and opened the file titled clearly, Property Transfer Agreement, Alice Reynolds. Beneath it were signatures from Mom, Dad, and myself, complete with a date and the official seal of Travis County Notary Office. Megan leaned closer to the screen, squinting to read the lines. She said nothing for nearly 2 minutes. Then, suddenly, she looked up, her voice caught in her throat. This is real? They sold the apartment to you? But they never said anything. They told me you just lived there for a few years. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. I bought that apartment with my savings, $85,000. Didn't borrow a cent. But, Megan stammered, then why would Mom and Dad... She didn't finish the question. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, then slowly turned to look at me, like she was trying to piece together logic from a jumbled mess. I spoke softly. I don't blame you for believing them. But I can't stay silent when the truth is being twisted. I've stayed quiet too many times already. Megan lowered her head. I'm sorry. I honestly didn't know. I really thought they were telling the truth. I stared at her. And what else did they say? She looked up and took a deep breath. They said they used all the money from selling the apartment to pay for my college tuition, that they had nothing left. So I should be grateful and do my best. I believed they had sacrificed everything for me. I leaned back, hands trembling slightly. You're on a full scholarship, you know that, right? I asked. Megan gave a bitter smile. I know. I still remember the day I got the letter. I ran to show Mom and she just nodded and said, good. That takes some pressure off us. I pressed my lips together. So, they never paid your tuition? She shook her head. Not once. Tuition, textbooks, even my freshman dorm. It was all covered by the scholarship. I've been working part-time at the library to pay for food and little expenses. A heavy silence settled between us. Then Megan spoke again, slowly. Do you remember when I wanted to sign up for that summer art program? I asked to go, but Mom said no because they'd already spent too much sending you to college out of state. I stared at her. I applied on my own, got scholarships, and juggled 3 part-time jobs to make it work. I never got a cent from them. Megan looked like the air had been knocked out of her. I always thought you were their favorite, because you went to school far away, because you had the apartment. I always felt like I got the short end of the stick. I used to think the same thing about you, I said quietly. Every time I asked for anything, Mom would say, "We're saving that for Megan." Turns out we were both being lied to. Another long pause followed. This one less heavy, and more like the faint echo of something we thought was real, slowly falling away. I don't understand. Why would they do that? Megan whispered. I looked at her, my voice lowering. I don't know. But it's clear they built a story that made us compete with each other, without even realizing it. Megan looked back at me through the screen, her eyes still dazed, like she'd just been pulled out of a long, false dream. I closed the laptop slightly to gather myself, then began. Do you remember when you wanted to go to that environmental summer camp? Mom said no because she'd already spent too much on my senior year tuition? Megan blinked. The one in Colorado? Yeah, I remember. I cried the whole week because all my friends went and I was stuck at home. I nodded. Megan, I never received a single dollar from them for tuition. That year I worked in the campus library from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Some weeks I lived off instant noodles. Mom said she paid for me? Not true. Megan gave a bitter laugh. Then what about when you supposedly got a brand new laptop for college? Mom used that excuse to say no when I asked to take art classes. I looked directly at the screen. That laptop was secondhand from a graduating student. $600. I had to deliver pizzas all summer to afford it. Megan bit her lip. Oh my God. I took a deep breath. And you? Did Mom ever say no to you because she had to spend money on me? Megan nodded. Too many times. When I wanted to take piano lessons in 6th grade, she said, "Your sister's studying out of state. We can't afford piano now." Then in 9th grade, I asked to go to the state science fair. Mom said no again because she'd just sent money to cover your books for the semester. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like the whole world had tilted sideways. I never asked Mom for books. I borrowed from the library or bought used ones. You know, I even had to photocopy entire chapters from the cheapest print shop near campus. Megan clenched her fists. How long have they been lying to us? I didn't respond right away. We stared at each other through the screen like we were digging through buried pieces of our past. A flood of small moments came rushing back. Every time we were denied something. Every guilt trip about how your sister/your brother is costing the family. Every time we looked at each other with jealousy, never knowing why. Suddenly I remembered something. Junior year, you asked Mom to buy you running shoes for track, didn't you? Yeah, I did, Megan nodded. She said she couldn't because she had just paid for your car repairs. I didn't make the team because my shoes were too worn out. I let out a dry laugh. I've never repaired a car in my life. Back then, I was still taking the bus every day. Remember? She went quiet, not the kind of silence that comes from sulking, but the kind when you realize the foundation you trusted your entire childhood was never real. I always thought you were the favorite, Megan said softly. Every time I got rejected, I assumed it was because you needed more. I used to resent you a lot, Alice. I looked at her, my gaze softening. I used to think the exact same thing about you. We both let out a crooked smile, a mix of bitterness and relief. Not because everything had been resolved, but because for the first time in years, we actually understood each other, no longer pitted against one another. Megan tilted her head. Why do you think they did that? I was quiet for a while. Maybe they wanted control. By making us jealous and competitive, we never questioned them. We were divided from within. Megan nodded, eyes reddening. And we fell for it for way too long. I felt something loosen in my chest, even though there were still so many questions unanswered. But one thing I knew for sure. This conversation was the first step in breaking that toxic cycle. I looked straight at her. From now on, we talk to each other directly. No middlemen. No one gets to speak for us. Megan nodded firmly. I promise. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My sleep had been restless, my head heavy. But what really pulled me out of bed wasn't the alarm. It was the thought that kept knocking. What else haven't Megan and I been told? Aunt Sarah, as soon as the clock hit 7 a.m. in Seattle, she answered after just 2 rings, her voice still rough from sleep. Hey, sweetheart, she said, softening as soon as she saw my face. What's going on? I didn't dance around it. Megan and I talked last night, and we started realizing a lot of things don't add up. Everything Mom and Dad told us over the years, about money, school, sacrifice, something's not right. She was silent for a few seconds, then asked gently, Did the two of you talk about the money your grandmother left behind? I lifted my head, heart suddenly pounding. What? She stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether to stay quiet or finally let the truth out. Then she sighed, her voice slow and heavy. Before she passed, your grandmother left behind a large amount of money. $400,000, split evenly into 2 parts. Each part was clearly stated in her will, to be used for your college education and Megan's. For that purpose only. I was speechless. No one ever told me anything about that. Aunt Sarah nodded sadly. Because they never intended to tell you. Your mom was named the custodian of the funds under the supervision of the family attorney. But right after your grandmother passed, they pulled all the money out of the trust. How exactly, I don't know, but the attorney quit shortly after. I barely whispered. And they spent it all? She didn't answer right away. She stood up, disappeared from the screen for a few seconds, then returned holding an old file folder. I probably shouldn't have kept this, she said, her voice low. But something told me to take pictures, before everything disappeared. Through the screen, I saw her flip through the pages until she landed on one with a familiar blue seal, Wells Fargo Bank. This is a statement from the first year after your grandmother died, she explained. Within 6 months, there were major transactions. A new car purchase, payments for a vacation to Italy, spending at upscale restaurants in Austin, Dallas, and Las Vegas. Every charge came directly from the account meant to fund your college education. My throat went dry, but I still managed to ask, Did you know that Grandma used to send them money every month? She nodded. Since you two were little, she sent $2,000 a month to help raise Alice and Megan. She didn't want you girls to go without, but every time she asked, your mom would say, the kids are fine. They don't need much. I remembered the cheap cereal boxes, the clearance rack clothes, the times I asked for school books and was told, wait until the next paycheck. Each memory now felt like a small cut, stacking into one big wound. I wanted to speak up, Aunt Sarah continued, her eyes filled with regret. But your mother threatened me. She said if I interfered, she'd make Grandma believe I was greedy, trying to claim part of the inheritance. I was afraid of losing my own mother's trust, so I stayed silent. I looked her straight in the eye. The trips they took every year, were they all with that money? She nodded slowly. Caribbean cruises, 5-star hotels in New York, designer bags, while you two were forced to survive on your own. It felt like my entire childhood was being rewritten. They weren't the self-sacrificing parents I had believed in. They were 2 people who built a perfect illusion, a performance my sister and I were the last to recognize as a lie. Auntie, I asked quietly, do you think Megan should know about this? She didn't hesitate. She needs to. And she deserves to. 2 days later, I booked a flight to Austin. Megan picked me up at the airport in an old car she borrowed from a classmate. We barely spoke on the way. Everything had been said the night before, and the rest was meant for today. We pulled up in front of the two-story house in the suburbs where we had grown up. Gray shingles, neatly trimmed lawn, and a new SUV already parked in the driveway. I glanced at Megan. Her hands clutched the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles were white. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed the tension. "Let's go in. The sooner the better." We rang the bell, Mom answered. Surprise flickered across her face, but only for a second. She regained her composure and opened the door wider. "Oh, Alice, Megan, why didn't you call first?" "We're not here for dinner, Mom," I said calmly. "We're here to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Then come in." Huh? Dad was sitting in the living room, holding his tablet, looking completely unbothered. When he saw us walk in, he raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, it's been a while since both of you came home together." Megan stayed quiet. I walked straight in, set my bag down, and sat across from them. "I'll get straight to the point," I said, eyes fixed on Mom. "We know about the money Grandma sent every month. And we know about the inheritance she left, specifically meant for our education." The room shifted instantly. Dad lowered his tablet, looked at Mom, then back at me. "Aunt Sarah told you?" Mom asked, her voice low but steady. I nodded. Megan added, "And I saw the statements, every transaction, the restaurants, the hotels, the vacations. Well, we thought you had nothing." Mom folded her arms and leaned back in her chair. "So, what?" Kneel again. I froze. "So what?" Dad gave a dry chuckle. "We're your parents. We had every right to decide how to use that money. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a home. Isn't that enough?" Megan clenched her hands. "That money was meant for us. Grandma made that clear. Why did you take it all and pretend you were broke?" Mom waved her hand. "What she wanted is her business. Once the money was in our hands, we had full control. What? Are you going to sue us?" I was stunned. Not by the threat, but by the sheer coldness in her tone. As if feelings, as if blood, meant nothing once weighed against control. I stared at them for a long time. These were the people who once cradled me when I scraped my knee, who cheered when I got into college. And now they sat there calmly, admitting they had stolen from us, without a trace of remorse. "I've always tried to understand," I said slowly. "I used to believe you were struggling. I thought I had to sacrifice, to be independent, to not burden you. But the truth is, you were never struggling. You simply chose not to give." Dad sneered. "What do you want, a heartfelt apology?" "Don't be naive, Alice." I stood up. "No. I don't need an apology. I just want clarity." I turned to Megan, then back to them. "Starting today, Megan and I will no longer have contact with you. No calls, no emails, no texts. This relationship died with the truth you chose to bury." Megan stood too, eyes glassy but voice firm. "We're not the kids you used to manipulate. You can live with your choices, and we'll live with ours." We turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped us. No one called out. Outside, the sun was brighter than I expected. As the door closed behind us, I felt something. 6 months later, autumn had just begun to cool the air in Austin. The leaves turned bright red and soft yellow, scattering gently along the sunlit sidewalks. I was sitting at a familiar cafe near the University District, one I always returned to whenever I flew back to the States. Across from me, Megan was giggling, stirring her peach tea with both hands. Her cheeks flushed after telling a hilarious yet cringeworthy story about a customer at the coffee shop where she now worked part-time. "And guess what?" she said, eyes glinting with mischief. "He tipped me $20 just because I remembered his favorite drink. I think he thought I had some kind of superpower." I laughed, genuinely this time. No bitterness, no weariness. Or maybe you're starting to rediscover yourself. Megan pressed her lips together in a small smile. Her eyes no longer held that confusing mix of hurt and resentment from the day we walked out of our parents' house together. She took a deep breath and said, "I didn't think I'd be okay this fast. But maybe it's because I'm no longer trying to prove anything to them." I nodded. 6 months ago. We closed that door behind us and never looked back. No one called, no one texted, no one apologized. And strangely enough, that silence became the space we needed to really see each other for the first time. I remember those early days well. Megan stayed temporarily in the dorms while I made calls across town looking for a place that was both safe and affordable. After a week of searching, we found a small studio apartment near campus. I signed the lease and covered her first 3 months, but after that, Megan handled everything on her own. "You helped me restart," she once said. "But the rest of the road? I'll walk it myself." And she kept her word. From study groups to part-time jobs, from simple home-cooked meals to skipping impulse buys, Megan gradually rebuilt her life on her own terms. No longer waiting on promises. No longer hoping our parents would change. "I think I'm luckier than most people," she said after a pause. "Even if it was late, I still learned the truth, and I still have you." I looked at her, something in my chest softening, like the early autumn breeze drifting through the cafe window. "And I still have you," I replied. "They took a lot from us, but they unknowingly left us with something irreplaceable." Megan tilted her head. "What's that?" I took a sip of coffee, smiling. "You." We stayed for nearly another hour, talking, teasing, making weekend plans to visit the outdoor fair. No one brought up the past. No one needed to. We didn't need miracles, just truth and each other's honest presence. On the way home, I stopped in front of Megan's little apartment. She opened the door and gave me a warm hug. Not the awkward kind born of obligation, but the kind shared between two people who had weathered a storm together and survived. I got back in the car, turned on the radio, and let the soft music drift into the fading afternoon. Inside, something was crystal clear. I didn't miss what we'd lost, be it money, reputation, or misgiven trust, because the most precious thing, in the end, was that we chose each other in a world that once convinced us we were enemies. Alice and Megan's story is a sobering reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from the people closest to us. And yet, in that betrayal lies the chance to uncover the truth, to set new boundaries, and to reclaim the relationships truly worth keeping. Money may be lost, trust may fracture, but real connection, built on understanding and respect, can still bloom from even the deepest cracks. What do you think about Alice and Megan's choice? Would you have done the same in their place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories to come.